The quiet power of introverts. Why silence is a strength. Once, in a land far away, there was an old sage who lived high upon a mountain. His wisdom was sought after by kings, scholars, and wanderers alike, and they would travel for days to reach him. But the sage rarely spoke, and when he did, his words were few, and yet they carried a weight that could shift entire worlds. One day, a brash young scholar, eager to prove his worth, climbed the mountain with haste. He reached the sage's dwelling, exhausted from the journey but determined to show his superiority. "Master," he said, "I have studied the greatest minds, read the most profound texts, and mastered the art of rhetoric. I have answers to every question you may pose." The sage smiled faintly and beckoned the scholar to sit. He poured tea into a cup in front of him, and then continued to pour. The tea quickly spilled over, soaking the table and dripping onto the floor. "What are you doing?" the scholar asked, astonished. The sage remained silent, continuing to pour. "Stop! The cup is full. It can hold no more," the scholar exclaimed. The sage paused, looked the scholar in the eyes, and said, "And so is your mind. How can it receive anything new if it is already full of your own noise?" The scholar fell into quiet reflection, understanding that true wisdom comes not just from acquiring knowledge, but from learning to listen, to observe, and to embrace silence. He realized that in the quest for answers, he had neglected the importance of the questions themselves. Now, why am I sharing this story with you? Because in today's world, we are all filled to the brim with noise. We're constantly bombarded by messages, distractions, and expectations. But what if, like that young scholar, we're missing something vital? What if true strength lies not in being louder, but in being still? What if silence is the key to unlocking creativity, leadership, and influence? Let's dive into the quiet power of introverts, and why silence is not just a state of being, but a profound source of strength. Let's begin with the psychology of introversion. Carl Jung, one of the most prominent figures in psychology, argued that introverts are those who find their energy from within, whereas extroverts seek energy from external sources. Introverts are often described as deep thinkers, individuals who reflect, process, and then act. This inner world, this space of contemplation, is where true insight is born. But it's also where the real strength of an introvert lies. The truth is, introverts don't need the constant noise of the outside world to feel alive. Instead, they are attuned to the quieter rhythms of life, the way the light changes on a quiet street, the sound of a friend's voice when they're speaking from the heart, or the space between words in a conversation. This heightened sensitivity to the world around them gives introverts a unique perspective. They don't rush to fill the silence. Instead, they allow it to settle and listen to what it has to offer. Philosophically, silence has been revered throughout history. Ancient Greek philosopher Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." For Socrates, silence was not the absence of sound, but the space where one could reflect, question, and engage in self-examination. The practice of silence was seen as a necessary condition for achieving wisdom, a way to connect with one's inner truth. Similarly, in Eastern philosophy, the concept of mauna, the practice of voluntary silence, was central to spiritual growth. In Indian traditions, silence was seen as a way to attain enlightenment. The idea was that, through silence, the ego could be quieted, and the true self could emerge. Introverts, without even trying, embody this principle. They naturally create space to reflect on their lives, their values, and their purpose. But there's more to it than just philosophy. Silence isn't merely a tool for introspection, it's also a source of strength in leadership. Take a moment and think about some of the most influential leaders in history. People like Mahatma Gandhi, Abraham Lincoln, or Eleanor Roosevelt. What did they have in common? They were all introverts. Gandhi, for example, was a quiet, reflective man who inspired millions through his actions, not his words. He used silence as a tool for creating powerful change. His practice of fasting was a form of silent resistance, a way to draw attention to the moral wrongs without uttering a word. His presence alone commanded respect and admiration. Abraham Lincoln, known for his stoic demeanor and thoughtful decision-making, often withdrew into solitude to reflect on the weight of his choices. He wasn't a man who sought the spotlight, but when he spoke, his words had the power to heal a nation. His quiet strength was rooted in the ability to reflect deeply, make thoughtful decisions, and act with conviction. Eleanor Roosevelt, too, was known for her quiet, yet powerful leadership. Despite being in the public eye, she often sought moments of solitude to gather her thoughts and center herself. Her ability to listen, to understand, and to reflect was key to her success as a diplomat and advocate for human rights. These leaders didn't shout to be heard. Their strength was in their ability to listen, to reflect, and to act with purpose. In the quiet spaces of their lives, they found the clarity that allowed them to lead with compassion, insight, and authority. Now, let's turn to creativity. Many of the world's most celebrated artists, writers, and innovators were introverts. J.K. Rowling, creator of the Harry Potter series, came up with the idea for the books while sitting alone on a train. Albert Einstein, often considered the quintessential introvert, spent hours in solitude, mulling over complex scientific problems. For introverts, solitude is not isolation, it's a fertile ground for creativity. In the stillness, the mind is free to wander, to connect ideas in new ways, and to find novel solutions to old problems. Introverts have the ability to dive deeply into their passions, to explore ideas that others might overlook, and to bring something unique into the world. But here's the key: introverts don't need to be the loudest in the room to make an impact. Sometimes, it's the quietest voices that carry the most weight. When an introvert speaks, people listen, not because they're loud, but because their words are considered, intentional, and meaningful. And this is the final point I want to leave with you. The world needs your quiet strength. It needs your ability to listen, to reflect, and to act with intention. In a world that's constantly moving, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop, take a breath, and listen to what the silence has to say. Remember the story of the young scholar who climbed the mountain to meet the sage? He came filled with noise, thinking he had all the answers. But it was in the silence that he learned the most. Silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the presence of understanding. So I challenge you, the next time you're in a room full of noise, embrace your quiet strength. The world needs it more than ever.